Hello, we are on Genesis 32 now. So if you've been following along, no, we're not having an earthquake if you're watching because the camera is moving. Uh, Normally, I make sure it doesn't move too much before I hit record, but I didn't do that today because I'm trying to shake things up. Not really, but uh, we're in Genesis 32, and it's really cool because Jacob and Esau are coming back together and they're going to meet. And Jacob's worried that Esau's going to try to kill him and stuff. And I was teaching a class one time, and a mom asked me this question. And I thought it was important because it was a mom. I'd never heard this before, and I'd never been in a room with a bunch of moms and grandmothers that they thought this way. So I thought it was really interesting. Her take was, do you think Jacob and Esau wanted to be like friends and be nice to each other and be brothers and not try to hurt each other? It's like, do you think maybe there was some genuine love in there? I said no. But maybe. I mean, it's a different take. I don't know. I think whenever you study Esau and Jacob and then realize that these are not children, these are not 20-year-olds or 40-year-olds or even 80-year-olds. These are really, really old guys. Not, they're not 80, but they're probably pretty close, though. I guess they are. They're over that. But uh, the concept of what we think people should do versus what they actually do is just different. And we got to understand the context of that. That's why we're doing this. So we'll understand the context. So let's jump into Genesis 32 in the complete Jewish Bible. It says this: Early in the morning, Laban got up, kissed his sons and daughters, and blessed them. Then Laban left and returned to his own place. Yaakov went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Yaakov saw them, he said, "This is God's camp," and called this place Machanaim, and it means two camps. We'll get into that. Yaakov sent messengers ahead of him to Esau, to his brother, toward the land of Seir, to the country of Edom, with these instructions: Here's what you are to say to my lord Esau. Your servant Yaakov says, I've been living with Laban and have stayed until now. I have cattle, donkeys and flocks, and male and female servants. I'm sending to tell this news to my lord in order to win your favor. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble reading this, but we'll keep trudging ahead. The messengers returned to Yaakov, saying, We went to your brother Esau, and he's coming to meet you. With him are 400 men. You can see why Jacob was a little worried. Jacob became greatly afraid and distressed. He divided the people, flocks, cattle, and camels with him into two camps, uh, saying, If Esau comes up to the one camp and attacks it, at least the camp that is left will escape. Then Yaakov says, God of my father Abraham and God of my father Yitzhak, Adonai, who told me, Return to your country and your kinsmen, and I will do you good. So remember, he's repeating this for himself too. God told me to do this. That's why I'm going to do it. I'm not worthy of all the love and faithfulness you have shown your servant since I crossed the Jordan with only my staff. But now, the Jordan is Hebrew for Jordan. But now I have become two camps. Please rescue me from my brother Esau. I'm afraid of him, afraid he'll come and attack me, without regard for mothers or children. You said, I will certainly do you good and make your descendants as numerous as the grains of sand by the sea, which are so many they can't be counted. He stayed there at night. Then he chose from among his possessions the following as a present for Esau his brother: 200 female goats, 20 males, 200 female sheep and 20 males, 30 milk camels and their colts, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 colts. He turned them over to his servants, every drove by itself, and said to his servants, Cross over in front of me and keep a space between each drove and the next one. He instructed the servant in front, When Esau, my brother, meets you and asks you, Whose servant are you? Where are you going? And whose animals are these? Then you are to say, They belong to your servant Yaakov, and they are a present he has sent to my lord Esau. and Yaakov himself is just behind us. He also instructed the second servant and the third and all that followed the droves. When you encounter Esau, you are to speak to him in the same way, and you are to add, and there, just behind us, is your servant Yaakov. For he said, I will appease him first with the present that goes ahead of me. Then after that, I will see him myself, and maybe he will be friendly towards me. So the present crossed over ahead of him, and he himself stayed that night in the camp. Uh, butter him up a little bit. He got up that night, took his 2 wives, his 2 slave girls, and his 11 children, and forded the Yabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, then sent his possessions across, and Yaakov was left alone. Then some man wrestled with him until daybreak. When he saw that he did not defeat Yaakov, he struck Yaakov's hip socket so that the hip was dislocated while wrestling with him. The man said, Let me go, because it's daybreak. But Yaakov replied, I won't let you go unless you bless me. The man asked, What is your name? And he answered, Yaakov. Then the man said, From now on you will no longer be called Yaakov, but Israel, because you have shown your strength to both God and men and have prevailed. Yaakov asked him, Please tell me your name. But he answered, You are asking about my name? And blessed him. Or why are you asking about my name? And blessed him there. Yaakov called the place Peniel, face of God, because I have seen God face to face. Yet my life is spared. As the sun rose upon him, he went on past Peniel, limping at the hip. This is why, to this day, the people of Israel do not eat the thigh muscle that passes along the hip socket, because the man struck Yaakov's hip at its socket, which is true. They still don't. They don't eat that muscle because of this right here. This story right here. So when people challenge me and say, but God said this, but it's hard, and it's like, but the people who are God-fearers, that believe this, that believe God said it for a reason, don't question whether it's a good idea or not. And that's really what I challenge you to do. If God said it, it's a good idea. If I said it, you really got to look into it. You got to weigh some evidence. You got to look deeper. But if God said it, just go with it. Don't argue with God about it. He's right, you're wrong. Move on. So on Jacob leaving Canaan, he encountered angels. We remember that. And on his return, he's encountering angels. Now he has to face his brother. Now, what the significance of him encountering angels as he leaves and as he goes, as he comes back, we're not really sure. We can only guess. We don't know a whole lot about angels. Most of what we know is just fiction, stuff we've made up ourselves. There's very little in the Bible about it. I tend to think, in my opinion, it was God's way of showing him that he left when he was supposed to and he came back when he was supposed to. It was kind of validation. It's kind of how I say it. My opinion. I don't know. But sometimes we find ourselves running ahead of God and then asking to be rescued from the consequences. So everything he did was outside of what God kind of wanted him to do, but now he's got to face the consequences. He's like, God, bail me out. Even though you told me not to do any of that stuff, I did it, and now I need help. I need to be bailed out. But time and experience of walking with God has changed Jacob. He's listened more. He's opened his heart. Pastor Hunter at Grace Point, a church in Portland that we go to, he gave a message on Sunday, and he was talking about making room in your heart for what God wants to tell you, or somebody else. If it's somebody who loves God and loves you, maybe they want to tell you something. But make room in your heart. That's really important. He acknowledges now that he deserves nothing, so he's humbled a little bit. The amount of the gift was enormous. I mean, you're talking like probably in today's money, $150,000 worth of animals. Now, this man seemed to Jacob to be flesh and blood. We don't know if he actually was. It just seemed to be. This being is divine because Jacob says so. He says, I have seen Elohim face to face. So that's enough for us too. Jacob said it was divine, so it's divine. Um, Hosea 12:4 speaks of this event. Hosea, as a prophet in the Old Testament, says, yes, he wrestled with the angel and won. He wept and pleaded for a blessing from him. There at Bethel, he met God face to face, and God spoke to him. What's really great about that is, they knew you don't ask for a blessing from somebody who doesn't have, that's not greater than you. How can they bless you if they're not above you in some way? Work with me here. This is a general kind of analogy. So he knew this was a greater being. That's how we know that he thought this was a divine being. Um, and followers of Yeshua have a similar distinction. He is a man, but he is also God. Jesus is fully man and fully God. I know, I don't understand it either. But that's okay. We're not supposed to fully understand it. The being he wrestled with is called a man, an Ish, and God. Elohim. It was a being, but it was also a God, and that's what we have in Yeshua, in Jesus. Jesus was the bearer of the divine word, so a messenger. He was a messenger of the word. So as an angel, he was the divine word, God, and he was flesh and blood, a man. If you can fully comprehend that, please hit that, leave a comment and explain that to me, because I don't have the brain capacity for that one. But I think that's a great way to remember why we see so much Jesus in the Old Testament. Because if we see him as the bearer of the divine word, the word, and also as God, and also as man, it's so big, we see more of what God is really trying to bring to us. So uh, this is literal and symbolic. All believers wrestle with God over control of our lives. Uh, if you've not wrestled with God over control of your life, that means you've probably not given control over to God. So think about that a little bit. Uh, Sometimes we pay a price like that, a permanent disability like Jacob had. I can honestly say a lot of my scars and trauma over the last 50 plus years have been a result of my wrestling control away from God, me controlling my life, not God. Uh, and so that was kind of my fault, is how I see it. So Jacob had always won with his skill of cunning. He was mixing a little bit of cunning with deceit, and he could kind of get his way. He had always kind of gotten away with things. And when he recognized that he was wrestling with something that was flesh and blood, he gave up and he asked to be blessed, because he realized, when we think back, and maybe this has happened to you, maybe it hasn't, but maybe you've had a moment where you really felt the presence of God in whatever form and whatever situation, whatever you were doing. Um, I'm not to say that's not real, and I don't think anybody else is. That's between you and God. But when you realize that it's God, and this happens, the first thing you want to do is just stop. You want to give up. You want to stop everything, because you're in the presence of God. Or maybe you've been in the presence of somebody who's really smart in your field or really top of the line. You're thinking, hey, be quiet and listen to everything they have to say. That's what it's like to feel that presence of God. For me, maybe it is for you. I'm not sure. So um, it's unfortunate for us, because we really can't get to that point sometimes until we're completely broken, and that was Jacob, until he was hurt enough to stop. That's really why the Sabbath is so important. And I know I get pushback on this, but I think the reason God wants us to stop one day a week, 1 out of 7, stop, just rest, is kind of indicative of this moment. God wants us to, hey, you're wrestling for no reason. You really can't be blessed until you stop. That's what God's trying to tell us, I think, my opinion. If you won't stop, how will you really see the blessing? Because Jacob surrendered. He got a new destiny and a new name. He got his name changed from Jacob to Israel. A prince with God, his chosen people. We see a new Jacob. He rests in God's strength. He takes on the weight of Israel and how important that is. You'll notice, hopefully, Mom does anyway, that I've changed out my blanket for the 12th man towel from Texas A&M, but I have a Israeli flag lapel pin and U.S. flag lapel pin because Israel is very, very important. Sorry, I got off track there. Our victory in God occurs by the defeat of ourselves. When we stop honoring this God and this kingdom and worrying about us, then we can really serve God. That's victory when we're like, yeah, I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. So verse 33 says, this is why the children of Israel to this day, a tradition to remove the sciatic nerve from animals to be eaten or sacrificed, developed from this event. He was given a new name that described his new nature, Israel. And this is more of just a way to remember oral story. Because remember, they didn't have books to read. So this tradition of not eating that nerve, to remove that sciatic nerve, reminded them of the story. That was the point of not doing that. Sometimes God has ritual or point or command, Sabbath, stuff like that, for another reason you don't understand yet. We haven't seen. But he's like, if you'll do this, I'll show you something bigger. So in Genesis 32, verse 29, the nation of Israel is established right there. If there's any doubt, this is God's chosen land and his chosen people. And we're in covenant with them because God was so gracious to provide a way. God bless. I just pray this is speaking to you. I pray that your hearts and minds are open not only to the land of Israel, but you feel a closeness to the God of Israel. And I pray you'll read ahead. God bless. Love God, love people, and change the world. God bless. Take care.